International students have become a hornet's nest for the Liberal government. CIBC Capital Markets reports non-permanent residents in Canada undercounted by 1 million. The Liberal government holds a cabinet retreat in beautiful Prince Edward Island. I'm sure they enjoyed some fresh lobster and beers and talked about housing. And that was the big item on the agenda for them. And guess what? They come out with an observation that international students are a problem. And there's possibility that a cap should go on international students. I'm no expert in immigration, and I think Canada is a great place to study, but the reality is we have a problem, okay? The government of Canada had a goal of bringing in about 450,000 foreign students on student visas in 2022, and they had 807,000 plus come into the country in 2022, and it looks like we're close to 900,000 in 2023. Now that's a damn problem. It's a real big problem. And the reality is it creates other issues. The other issues are around housing. There's not enough housing for these folks. It's become a shit show. Okay, you have students living in squalor. They're living on literally mattresses in basements separated by bed sheets as walls. Sharing one bathroom, you got possibly dozen people in a house. And what it's done is it's created an issue, a huge issue on the investment front, because where there is an opportunity, there are folks that take advantage of it. And this is where we see many investors taking up houses in regular, normal communities and carving them up into rooms to rent them out by the room. And it's driving up rents. It's driving up the cost of homes. Because when you have this inequality of number of people coming in here to study with not enough housing, they have to live somewhere. Now, we hear the odd story of students they're homeless people living in cars, living under bridges. There's one story about that. And it's created a shit show. And the amount of pressure it's put on the system is crazy. Now, the Liberals still haven't realized that raising the immigration levels to 500,000 is still problematic as well, because it impacts infrastructure, it impacts pressure on social services, healthcare, the various needs. Look at the food banks. The food banks are going crazy. They haven't served this many people ever. We have refugees living in the streets. We have encampments all over cities. It's become a real problem, and it's because someone's not manning the gate. Okay, and we will continue to see problems of this nature until this government takes this issue seriously. Now, I want to point out that the majority of these foreign students come into Ontario. There's a website called the Canadian Bureau of International Education. They have a whole bunch of stats on there. Okay, they've reported that in 2022 we had 807,750 international students in Canada, and 51% of them come to Ontario. Okay, so if you're going to establish some form of caps, maybe you should start looking at where these student visas are going to. So if colleges are requesting that more student visas be issued, maybe the government should say, well, you know what? Ontario's got too many. Maybe you should set up a school in New Brunswick or set up a school in Saskatchewan, because they probably have the infrastructure there that can handle 10,000 or whatever the number is. But when they're all coming into one place, especially the majority of them, it creates a major problem, a housing dilemma. Okay? Now, I'd like to point out that this summer, there was a protest at the airport by international students that were risk being deported because they were part of a fraudulent admission scam by some character in Jalandhar, which is a town in India, who was a foreign student immigration consultant, selling letters of admissions to Canadian colleges that were fraudulent. Okay? These people would come over here and somehow they got permits. So there's a few holes in the system. They got permits, they came here, they were told, listen, your application was denied, it's deferred, we're going to have to put you in another college. And then these folks, because they then tried to apply for permanent residence, were declined and deemed persona non grata because of this scam that came in. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of folks that were protesting at Pearson International Airport. It was this summer. The immigration minister at the time, Sean Fraser, okay, had to put a moratorium on the deportation of these people because these people are now trying to get their permanent residence 4, 5, 6 years later after they've gotten a certificate or a diploma somewhere else. They're now working, they're starting families, they're doing whatever, and they were risk being deported. And Sean Fraser had to come into this role to help them out. Now, I want to point out this name, Sean Fraser, okay? Just keep that in mind for a minute, because he is now the housing minister, okay? He was responsible and understood of these scams that were taking place in these colleges that have just become diploma mills, okay? And he knows of this hole in the system, and now it was on his watch that this shit happened, and he's now been promoted to housing minister. So I want you to think about how this government's working, how they promote people for incompetence. How can you have 807,000 student visa applications filter in to a system, okay, that has a goal of 450,000? Doesn't make any sense. No bells are going off. Nobody's wondering what the hell's going on. And this creates a huge problem because cities and provinces use these projections on population growth to plan infrastructure, to plan their budgets, to build homes and infrastructure systems to support these growing communities. And when these numbers are off by a significant number, it's a challenge. And to put things into perspective, I mentioned this before, but when you talk about 500,000 people that are unexpectedly landing on our shores, every 2 years, that's the size of a Mississauga being filled when homes for a Cornwall are being built. It creates a problem. It creates a very, very significant crisis that we're now dealing with, okay? Now, I'll leave that for a minute. We now have a report that came out by CIBC World Markets, okay? Benjamin Tal was on Global News yesterday. He's their head economist at CIBC, very well known in the mortgage community. I think he's one of the brightest guys out there. He reports that Canada's non-permanent residents are undercounted by 1 million people. Folks, 1 million people. Not 10,000, not 100,000. We're talking 1 million people, okay? So 750,000 are non-permanent residents that overstayed their visa deadline. 750,000, okay? 250,000 were not counted by the census. That's 1 million people. So folks, I got news for you. The federal government does not have a system to track people who have expired visas in Canada. There's nobody tracking down folks that have extended their stay past their visa deadline date, okay? But they are sitting at the border making sure you're not bringing any meat or cheeses into this country, okay? Nobody's knocking on doors saying, hey, what are you still doing here? Give me your non-permanent visa application. Let me see when it expires. What are you doing to either extend it or do whatever? There's no system to track these people down. So think about that. 750,000 people reported by CIBC World Markets that are still around as non-permanent residents beyond their visa deadline. Now, I love immigrants. I'm a child of an immigrant. I think it's great to get the diversity in the country, but we need gatekeepers. We need people that track what is going on. And this is an absolute embarrassment, okay? Because the minister that this situation happened under is our new housing minister, trying to solve a crisis by the mess he created in immigration. I want everybody to think about that. It's going to be a shit show. Housing will not get fixed. Affordable housing doesn't exist. And everybody wants to look at the green belt and point fingers at this. Okay, sure, it's a mess. Go fire the housing minister for the province of Ontario. But the reality is, no houses are going to be built. People are still going to wait because it takes a long time to build houses, get approvals, get permits, go through all the environmental reports, all the consultation, all the NIMBYism. It's not going to happen, folks. So if you're waiting with bated breath that new housing is going to get built in this environment with this government, good luck. It's not happening. And at these rates, it's never going to happen for a while. So don't believe what these people are telling you. It's all a bunch of bullshit. Okay? So on that note, I'll leave it at that. But think about it. You got our new housing minister that came from immigration, knew the problems that existed, and he's been chosen to fix housing. Good luck, Mr. Fraser. Bank of Canada meets next week. Everybody's wondering, will the bullet in the chamber be shot by our wonderful governor, Tiff Macklem? I got some good news and I got some not so good news. So I'll give you the good news first. I'm going to guess things are going to remain the same. Okay, I don't think there's going to be a rate increase. I sure hope not. Okay, because we're starting to see some pain on the job front. You know, July had about 45,000 construction jobs lost in the summer, in the best months of work in construction. And that has a lot to do with a lot of building permits that have gone silent. They've dropped. The building permits have dropped about 50%. The only place that it's going nuts is Alberta. But for the most part, you know, the Ontario market's just seeing crickets on the new permit front. It's just too expensive. 31% input taxes to build houses. It doesn't make any sense at these rates. And these contractors who are borrowing money to build are usually at prime plus situations, and at 7-8%, it's not working. Okay, folks? So don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of building anytime soon. We're going to start seeing job losses. We're starting to see it now that back to school's here. Starting to see retail numbers really slip, okay? And that doesn't bode well. And I think the Bank of Canada has that data and realizes that the inflation numbers that did come out in July, that little bump has to do with the base month effects of last July, August, and September, which is going to show a little increase, okay? But don't get too worried about that. The bad news is I think rates are going to stay here for a while. The 5-year bond has come down since 2 weeks ago. I think we're sitting at 3.88 today. It was at about 4.11, 4.12 2 weeks back. So it's almost brought back a quarter point, which leads me to believe that that Bank of Canada quarter point hike isn't going to happen, but could later on in the year, because there's 2 other meetings the rest of this year, and I think he's going to save it for that. The reality is I think we're going to see high rates for longer. Don't think that rates are going to be coming down anytime soon. We're starting to see bank results coming out. We're starting to see lenders increase their loan loss provisions. And keep in mind that loan loss provisions don't necessarily mean that they represent mortgage arrears, okay? Banks have other loans. They have business loans. They have car loans. They have credit card debt. They have personal loans, lines of credit, okay, that also go bad. And they do have a lot of stuff that's unsecured. So that sort of stuff tends to go in arrears prior to mortgages, okay? Because people need their shelter, people need their places to live, and that's the last thing they stop making payments on.